Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This episode, we'll be talking, UEFA Champions League roundup, MLS Decision Day, USA versus England, Part 1 of this year, MLS MVP, Dahmer, U.S. men's national team Optimism, and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you doing on this Wednesday, October 5th of the year 2022?
I am doing well. I noticed you just lumped in Jeffrey Dahmer with a whole bunch of other stuff.
So I finished the Dahmer mini-series, I guess it would be 10 episodes over there on Netflix. This was I read one of their most successful episodal types of things that they have had. So a lot of people are into the macabre story of Jeffrey Dahmer, and has kind of brought it all up. I was in my 20s back in the 90s when it all happened, and it was horrendous at the moment, and that it has been turned into this incredible 10-part series. I think the guy that plays Dahmer does a really, really good job. And I think that they handled it in a way that, look, it's still an entertainment piece, and there's probably plenty of dramatic license that is taken. But I don't think that they are glorifying this monster and this animal. But it is riveting. Sometimes it probably shouldn't have been 10 episodes. It goes on a little bit long and it drags a little bit at times, but for the most part, this was crazy times, and it goes into how much more it was. But yeah, I recommend it. Did you watch anything, my friend?
I had a great Tuesday night that did have a weird ending.
Ooh, okay. What was the great part? How did it start out so great?
I went to the Hollywood Bowl.
Ooh, what'd you see?
For a concert, Nas, Wu-Tang, and Busta Rhymes. And over the course of the show, they brought out Jadakiss, Redman, LL Cool J, and Mary J. Blige. I know that most of those names mean absolutely nothing to you.
I've heard of Mary J. Blige.
Or anybody else here. You're too old, and then people like our director, Aaron, weren't even born yet when any of those people were relevant. So I am dating myself a little bit.
Who was the best of the performers? Who brought the house down?
Method Man was incredible.
He brought it.
I thought, yeah. Busta Rhymes, too, terrific. So it was a great show.
Right.
But the weird ending is Nas, who is my favorite rapper.
Oh, you've said that before.
This
yes,
was
I do know
my
that. 6th
time seeing him live.
Right.
Wu-Tang, by the way, remember I mentioned on this podcast, that was my first ever concert when I was at Michigan.
Yep.
I went to a concert in Detroit, Wu-Tang Clan. So Nas was closing out the show by performing One Mic, which is a song
classic.
You've never heard of.
Classic.
Classic song.
Classic.
And they went just past the 11 p.m. curfew.
curfew.
LA has a very strict.
Yep.
And so they shut his mic off mid-song.
Wow.
The place was stunned. Everybody was looking at each other like, what just happened? It was a very awkward. And then all the rappers just kind of looked at each other and said, I guess we're done. And they just walked off stage.
That's it, huh? Elvis Costello, you know who Elvis Costello is?
Sure.
He, at one point during a couple of tours that he was doing, and probably maybe he still does it now, he would close out the show with just him and an acoustic guitar, but no amplification at all. So everybody kind of had to hush, and it was an amazing, bit of theatrics, and actually quite moving and beautiful. I would have loved if they had done that there, where it would have been take it right back down to its most, to its rawest form. There, no microphones. No, accompaniment or anything like that, and just if he had just gone off on the stage without the microphone, that's what he should have done. Lost opportunity, my friend. So it happens. But good show nonetheless.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Look, there is a lot of soccer. Are you ready to light this candle?
Let's do it.
All right. Look, let's get right into MLS because we are in decision week. And Decision Day is coming on the weekend. We have the mini Decision Day that is happening right now, Wednesday, as we speak. But let's start on the Western Conference, okay? Because that is much more decided right now. Where do you want to start?
So just to set the table, LAFC have clinched the 1 seed. Austin are locked into number 2. Dallas, the Galaxy, and Nashville have all clinched playoff spots. But as far as which one of those teams will be hosting first-round games, it's still very fluid. Dallas are third right now, but they could end decision day fifth. Nashville and the Galaxy could finish anywhere from third to seventh. So those teams still have a lot to play for on decision day in terms of seeding and home field, et cetera. Dallas hosts SKC, the Galaxy away to Houston, and Nashville away to LAFC. But where the drama really is, is those two remaining playoff spots. You have four teams fighting for them, and the delicious part is those four teams battle head-to-head. Portland are 6 right now, Minnesota 7, RSL 8, Vancouver 9. Minnesota hosts Vancouver decision day, RSL hosts Portland.
All right, so RSL hosting Portland, and keep in mind all the games are played at the same time, 5 p.m. Eastern time. RSL hosting Portland. I think Portland's in trouble, okay? You got to go to RSL. It's not an easy place to play. As we mentioned, if Salt Lake were to win that, they would jump above Portland. But obviously Minnesota, that could change some things too.
Here's the delicious part. Okay, any of the four teams, RSL, Portland, Minnesota, Vancouver, if they win, they're in. If they lose, they're out. And then Portland and Minnesota would get in with a draw, so they have that extra club in their bag. But it's amazing how it's set up that way.
And the mindset and literally the setup that you have going into a game where a point is enough, and whether it's Portland or Minnesota, well, Minnesota playing at home, right? So it's hard to kind of go into a defensive shell, and even whether it's home or away, that's dangerous to do for any team, and yet the tendency is that's what you want to do, and you don't want to do anything stupid.
Minnesota, they're only 1 point from their last 6. They've been dreadful, so they only need a point, but even that's been tough sledding for them in recent weeks.
I think Minnesota will get the point at home. What do you think?
Yes.
Okay.
But it sounds like you think RSL beat Portland.
I think RSL beat Portland, and they need that win. Yeah, I'll go with RSL beating Portland. I think that, yeah. And then I got Minnesota at the very least getting the point against Vancouver, although Vancouver has really come on here at the end. Let's see. LA Galaxy is in the playoffs, but they get to go to Houston for a possibility of third place, right? If FC Dallas loses.
Yes. Yeah. The Galaxy are trying to get a home game in the first round. That's their big focus.
Yeah. I mean, Houston's already golfing. So that's certainly doable for them. And FC Dallas, as you mentioned, playing SKC, they can draw. If they draw, they lock up third place.
Correct.
And yeah, I think that FC Dallas gets at the very least a point against SKC. LAFC Nashville. Nashville's in an interesting position because they can finish in a bunch of different places here.
Right. They're in, but they're not sure where, if they're going to be home or away, first round of the playoffs.
I mean, we know that as goes Mukhtar, so goes Nashville, and that worries me that we're relying so much on one play. Yeah, I think LAFC beats Nashville there. So, all right, anything else when it comes to the Western Conference?
That is it.
All right, Mosse. That was the West. Let's go to the East now. Some things are coming into focus here, but still there is going to be a lot of drama come the weekend. Where should we start?
Well, there's still a question about the 1 seed in the East. Philadelphia with a 2-point lead over Montreal, but Montreal have more wins. On decision day, Philadelphia hosts Toronto, Montreal away to Inter Miami. If Montreal were to win and Philadelphia were to drop points, Montreal would get the 1 seed and not Philadelphia, which would be quite a development.
Wow, can you imagine Philadelphia pissing it away here at the last minute here to our friends from the Great White North there, Montreal? By the way, Montreal, hats off to Montreal and Wilfred Nancy over there. My goodness, that they're even in that position, says just how good they are. So do you think ultimately Philadelphia will hold on?
Yes, I think they get a win over Toronto and clinch that 1 seed. So 5 teams in the East have clinched playoff spots: Philadelphia, Montreal, NYCFC, the Red Bulls, and Inter Miami.
Wait, who's fifth, Mosse?
Inter Miami punching their ticket with
The team
this
from down in Miami? David Beckham's Inter Miami is
Yeah.
in the playoffs?
midweek win over Orlando. NYCFC guaranteed a top 4 finish, so they know they'll be hosting a first-round game. And that game would be at Red Bull Arena unless they're facing the Red Bulls, which is still possible. Then they'd have to figure out somewhere else to play it. So that's the situation there. But
I think either way it'll be at Red Bull Arena. Right? I mean, if they're facing the
well, no, but if they're the higher seed and they're placing the Red Bulls, they couldn't have a quote-unquote home game be in the Red Bulls home stadium, so they'd figure out somewhere else to put that. That would be
Why?
a bit farcical.
Why can't NYCFC play their home? You're saying NYCFC playing their home game?
Yes. Imagine if NYCFC are the higher seed facing the Red Bulls in the playoffs, and their quote-unquote home game against the Red Bulls is at the Red Bulls stadium. That would be
But
kind of
that's what they
farcical.
do. They play all over the place.
Well, that's apparently a bridge too far for MLS because they've said they'd figure something else out in that scenario.
Oh.
But
Hello, Connecticut. Okay.
But let's not bury the lead here.
Yes.
Inter Miami
Yes.
in the playoffs. Your thoughts?
Congratulations to Inter Miami and to David Beckham and to Chris Henderson, who I think deserves a tremendous amount of credit, as does Mr. Neville there. And there was a time when it was precarious as to whether, I guess you continue on with him or you don't. But Chris Henderson came in, he steadied the ship, and midweek just absolutely demolishing Orlando in that rivalry game for Florida. And, in a week where Higuain has announced his retirement from soccer, he doesn't look like he's stopping. And if he's going to go out, he's going to go out on top and flying. It's great. This team came in with a lot of fanfare. And obviously we know they cheated. They got the punishment. They took their punishment. And they not only recovered, but they adjusted and they found a way back. And so I got a lot of respect for the folks on and off the field that worked hard to get them to this position. I didn't necessarily think that it was going to happen, but that they're here and that they're flying right now. I mean, I still don't think they're a great team, but I'm not sure if I really want to play them in the playoffs, given the way that they are coming into the playoffs. And we've seen time and time again where if you come into the playoffs hot, it's a problem, even for higher seed teams.
So we have 3 teams battling for the last 2 spots: Cincinnati, Columbus, and Orlando. We'll get to that in a second. But Charlotte eliminated from playoff contention by virtue of a 2-2 midweek draw against Columbus in that makeup game. The expansion team, they fought the good fight, hung in there until close to the end of the season, but they will not be going to the playoffs. What do you make of Charlotte in year 1?
It's weird because I think it still should be looked at as a successful inaugural season. The crowds that they got, and not just the size of the crowds, but the energy of the crowds. That it's played in a football stadium, it's not great, but it didn't stop or dampen their enthusiasm. And so I think that they also deserve a tremendous amount of attention and credit for making the league better. The league is better with Charlotte in it. Now, can they improve? And keep in mind that a lot of us, including myself, didn't think that Charlotte was going to even be in the running when it came to the last week of the season for a playoff spot. So that they were there was great. They're going to feel hard done because of the situation of the postponed game and the restrictions that they had going into that must-win game midweek. But the rules are the rules. And I think that there is a brighter future for Charlotte ultimately, and that this is a year in which they can build upon. You changed your coach, you introduced yourself to your market and to the country and to this league, and I think pretty much there's a resounding appreciation and maybe respect, and at times probably a begrudging respect for the success that Charlotte had.
All right, so here's the deal with the playoff picture. Cincinnati are away to DC United on decision day. They only need a point in that game, and they're in. However, if they were to lose, then they're scoreboard watching our game on FS1, which is Orlando City hosting Columbus. If there's a winner in that game, they would still be okay. If Orlando wins and they go to the playoffs with Orlando, if Columbus wins, they go to the playoffs with Columbus. The nightmare scenario for Cincinnati is they lose and that Orlando City-Columbus game ends in a draw. In that scenario, they get knocked out and Orlando and Columbus go in.
Well, first off, the good part is that our game is huge. And means something. When I say our game, I mean the game that we're doing on Fox in the Eastern Conference, and we're whipping around and showing everything that's going on. I love that. So Cincinnati going to DC, man. I mean, DC's a crapshoot, but I mean, you've seen Stranger Things, right? CC's not going to roll over for Cincinnati. I mean, I think when I look at this, Mosse, who's in the biggest trouble right now? I think Columbus. You?
Yeah, I mean they have to go away to Orlando. Now they can play for a draw in that game. So
if Columbus and Orlando tie, then they both go through. Right, and Cincinnati loses.
And Cincinnati loses, then they both go through. But if Columbus and Orlando tie, Columbus goes through regardless.
Right, but people always ask me about the fixing of games and all that kind of stuff, and I'm not suggesting that here by any stretch of the imagination. But I vividly remember when it was good for both teams playing at times in Italy, where everybody kind of looked at each other and said, "Hey,
Yeah, if there's a scenario, let's say we get to the 80th minute on decision day, Cincinnati are getting drilled by DC United 4-0. Columbus and Orlando and Columbus are saying 0-0. I'm sure there's going to be sort of some,
hey, we all live to fight another day.
Take it easy.
Oh my goodness.
So it's going to be fun. Decision day. We're excited. Our game is Orlando City Columbus on FS1, but of course we're bringing you updates from all the other action in the Eastern Conference.
All right, so we've done the West and we've done the East. Mosse, since it's the last week and the Major League Soccer MVP award is only based on the regular season, I thought, as I do each and every year, that I would give you my criteria for my pick when it comes to MLS MVP. As those that have followed us before and for any length of time will know, that choosing an MVP in Major League Soccer is subjective. MLS, purposely or not purposely, I don't know, but they do not give us any criteria by which to judge the candidates other than what we think is good or valuable. So over the years, in an effort to kind of simplify things and to provide some level of transparency, I have made up my own criteria. So once again, this is how it goes. Number one, it is all about goal scorers. Scoring a goal is the only way to win a game. So there is nothing more, quote unquote, valuable than those that do it. So it's only about goal scorers, right? Number two, it's not about how many goals you score, but it's about how many different games you score in, because I want the player who is consistently scoring in more games, even if his season total might not give him the golden boot. Number three, I don't count penalties. Sorry. I mean, you can at me, you can send your tweets in and stuff like that. I do not count penalties. For me, they just do not hold the same value as goals from the run of play. I actually think, and I've said this before, Mosse, penalties should be in a separate statistical column, okay? They can warp perception and they can skew the assessment of a player. And finally, if you are my MVP, you have to be on a team that makes the playoffs. When half of the league in Major League Soccer makes the playoffs, at the very least, a league MVP should be from a playoff team. So those are my criteria. Each year I get my data together and I send it off to Paul Carr, the great Paul Carr, and he's got fancy machines over there. And he puts it in and he spits it out. And on the way to work today, he said that as we sit here today, again on Wednesday, October 5th, leading my MVP race with the weekend to go is Drusi. Okay? And he is, when you all totaled, he's 15 of the criteria that I have. He's 15. At 14 is Arango and Vasquez. And then at 12, it's Ferreira, Gazdag, and Chicharito. Some of you might be saying, well, where's Mukhtar? He's actually down at 11. So he's not winning my MVP. Neither is Ferreira, Gazdag, or Chicharito. Anyone of Drusi, Arango, and Vasquez could ultimately win it, depending on what happens this weekend. Now, over the years, because, Mosse, I'm a huge influencer, all right? And people have tried to sway me one way or the other, and they've tried to ply me with extravagant gifts. This is one of those gifts here, Mosse. This is sent to me by the good people over there at Nashville. And look, this is wonderful. I thank them. This is a Hani Mukhtar record, vinyl. I don't know if there's audio files out there, but this is a vinyl record. And it's actually, there is a record. I don't have a record player. I'm not one of those vinyl people, but evidently producer Sean does have a record player, so he's going to find out what's on it. And this is them signed, by the way, right here. This is them lobbying for Mukhtar to be the MVP. And on the back, instead of your track listing, it basically has side A, side B of all of the different goals he scores. It's actually very clever. Probably cost them a good penny, but they're supporting their guy out there. Over the years, I have gotten a lot of these different things. Some more creative than others, some better than others. This is one of the better ones, I will say. But again, since I have my criteria, that's just the way that it goes. Agree? Disagree? Please send in your comments to me. Mosse, you've seen me go through this spiel now a number of years. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I've expressed my displeasure with your formula.
And why is that?
First of all, I don't agree with the premise that it has to be a goal scorer. I've seen plenty of teams in my day where I thought a midfielder was the most important player on the team.
But you would agree that the most valuable thing in soccer is putting the ball in the back of the net.
Sure.
Okay.
And your criteria doesn't allow for how much talent a guy had around him, factoring in the degree of difficulty of a guy having less talent around them and what type of team he played on. There's just not a lot of leeway there for sort of the eye test human element if you're just going to adhere strictly to this mathematical.
You think it's much too mathematical,
right,
data-driven, much more robotic.
And,
and strict.
You have come up with a formula, which means that Hani Mukhtar isn't even in the conversation for you, which sort of flies in the face of every sort of smart, knowledgeable person that's followed this MLS season.
It wouldn't be the first time.
so that is something to think about, but nevertheless, it's the way you've chosen to go. It is what it is.
Fine. Make your own criteria. All right, listen. Like I said, let me know if you agree or disagree. I mean, you will whether I want you to or not. But I do actually want to hear from you when it comes to maybe you have your own criteria as to who should be and why the MLS MVP. And again, it will stop. The voting will stop at the end of this weekend, and may the best man win, whether it's with my criteria or not. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll take a trip around Europe because there's all sorts of stuff happening, in particular when it comes to Champions League. We'll have a recap for you. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. All right, Mosse, big week when it comes to Champions League. Should we go around? Where do you want to start?
We have a Cinderella story in this season's Champions League.
I like Cinderella. The band. All right. So you want to go right to Bruges, right? And we're calling it Bruges. We're not doing the Brugge thing, right?
Club Brugge, 2-0 winners over Atletico Madrid, 3 wins out of 3, 0 goals conceded. The star of the show, former Barcelona striker Ferran Jugla, who had a goal and an assist. Our good friend Tejan Buchanan also played a part in one of the goals. They are looking good.
I mean, undefeated, unscored upon. And flying right now, and unless something drastic happens here, if they continue on here, their first time ever into the knockout phase. So congratulations to them. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to see. It's fun to see, especially in this era, and for teams where the disparity between spending can sometimes be so dramatic and big. It's not that we don't have the elites and the super clubs also there that did fine, but this is fun. This is good.
Atletico, by the way, started Antoine Griezmann, which they're reluctant to do because they're trying to keep his
Right.
minutes down so it doesn't trigger that permanent buy option in the loan deal with Barcelona. But every now and then when Simeone feels like it's a really big game, he'll put him in there from the start, which he did. And Antoine Griezmann missed a penalty, so that gamble did not pay off. Bruges take all 3 points.
Well, you mentioned Barcelona. You want to move to them?
Yes, that was the big game on Tuesday at the San Siro. Barcelona fell 1-0 to Inter. Çalhanoğlu with the goal late in the first half. A lot of VAR controversy in this one. In the first half, Inter thought they had a penalty when the ball hit Eric Garcia's hand, but they reviewed it, and they spotted a millimetric offside by Lautaro Martinez in the build-up.
Which negates it, right?
All right. And then in the second half, when Barcelona was trailing 1-0, they thought they had equalized. Dembele crossed it. Onana and Ansu Fati both went for it. It dropped for Pedri to slot it home, but they reviewed it and found a handball by Ansu Fati, which a lot of people were upset about. I did not have a big issue with that call. I was okay with it. But the one at the end, I had a major issue with.
Everybody had an issue with it.
Barcelona should have had a penalty late, a cross into the Inter box. Denzel Dumfries goes to clear it, misses it with his head. It clearly hits his arm. And how they could review that and not give a penalty is beyond me. Xavi was furious, rightly so. Barcelona got completely screwed on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I stand for referees, and I will give them the benefit of the doubt, even more so nowadays because of the technology that they have at their disposal that is put in place to make things clearer and to actually protect them in a certain way. And yet in something like this, and it's not to say that the subjective nature of this still doesn't exist. But I think if you polled people after that and took out the affiliation, even neutrals, everybody would look at that and say, well, how could you come to that decision? And I think when those types of things happen, and to be fair, it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it hurts the game, it hurts VAR, and it hurts refereeing when those types of things happen. So yeah, they Xavi and company have a right to feel aggrieved.
Barcelona now third in the group. They're trying to avoid their second straight group stage exit. They do still have home games against Inter and Bayern Munich, but nevertheless, they put themselves in a little bit of trouble here. So keep an eye on that. One team that's not had any trouble at all in this season's Champions League is Napoli, who producer Sean Sullivan tells us that some Napoli fans are upset we haven't given them enough love so far this season. I've mentioned them a few times.
They're whining. I mean, I learned Italian, but I didn't learn the word for whining. But stop whining, okay? You go out and you have an incredible result like this on the road, 6-1 over Ajax. We're going to talk about you, but you got to earn it.
Yeah, it was 2 from Raspadori. Then Di Lorenzo, Zielinski, Varaskelia, and Simeone all found the back of the net as well. 13 goals in 3 games for them in the Champions League. First place in their group. They're also atop the table in Serie A. So Luciano Spalletti doing an incredible job. Anguissa in the midfield has been very impressive. So I like everything about this team right now.
I do too. Having said that, it was a weird game in that, yes, you lose 6-1, so you think you're getting just crushed. And yet there were opportunities, and sometimes when the floodgates open, and they did. And for Ajax, which is a storied club, this at home, this was a message. And yes, we will talk more about Napoli going forward, and they deserve it. And to be fair to you, Mosse, you have certainly brought up Napoli over the recent times here. So it's not as if we've never talked about them.
Before this game, Ajax put out this really neat tweet. I don't know if you saw that. It was like a picture of Cruyff and Maradona in heaven watching the game together, which everybody thought was kind of a cool angle to come up with for this game. The other match in this group, Liverpool, 2-0 winners at home over Rangers. Trent Alexander-Arnold with a lovely free kick, and then Mo Salah from the penalty spot. So Liverpool,
much needed,
yes.
Much needed for Liverpool with what they are, going through and the difficulties and challenges right now for Klopp and company. And it wasn't as if they were back to their old selves, but they beat up on a lesser team. And Trent Alexander-Arnold, given all of the criticism and everything that's gone on with him, and all of the constant chatter, which is what happens in England. That's a nice. It doesn't necessarily mean that the chatter is going away, because it wasn't necessarily directed at him scoring free kicks or anything like that. But this is a nice way to at least say, hey, I'm a whole lot better than a lot of people think I am.
Shifting to Wednesday, the biggest game, I think, was Chelsea hosting AC Milan. Chelsea with the 3-0 win. Fofana, Aubameyang, and Reece James with the goals. Milan have all sorts of injuries right now, including the starting right back Calabria, who's going to be out the remainder of this calendar year, which meant an opportunity from the start for Serginho Dest. He, like the rest of the AC Milan backline, had a rough day, but at least he got to play, which is more than we can say for his U.S. national team teammate, Christian Pulisic, who did not start, did not come on. Chelsea made 5 subs. None of them was him. So much for the fact that assist over the weekend against Crystal Palace was going to be this new dawn and Graham Potter's arrival. What do you think?
No, I mean, well, the Dest part of it, yeah, it's glass half full or glass half empty. I think, I want Serginho Dest to be playing and playing consistently right now, and at least he's on the field and he's starting, even in what was a pretty bad performance from Milan. It wasn't, like you said, it wasn't all him, but that's better than still what Christian Pulisic is. It's not enduring because he's going to be fine, but the reality is, I think, is setting in on maybe has already on Potter and this team right now, that Christian Pulisic is a specific type of player, and if you are not structured to play with that type of player, then he is not of no use, but of much lesser use.
I was texting with our good friends Ian Joy and Keith Costigan about this today.
Yep. Smart men. Yep.
Pulisic made his senior debut in early 2016. It was our first season covering the Bundesliga. It occurred under Thomas Tuchel. And so in terms of managers in his career, it's been Thomas Tuchel, Peter Bosz, Stoger, Lucien Favre, then Lampard, then Tuchel, who I'm counting again. It's like Grover Cleveland. He counts twice because it was at a different club, different stage of Pulisic's career, so he could have come around on him the second time around, but didn't.
Right.
And now Graham Potter. It's early days under Graham Potter, but let's say he doesn't get on the field much. It's now a lot of managers he's had, none of which I would argue fully trusted him, fully bought in, and felt like he should be this week in, week out starter who you build an attack around. I mean, that's kind of an interesting pattern there.
It is. And, look, you go through a career, if you have any type of longevity, you are going to play under multiple coaches. And some of them you'll get along with and some of you won't. Some of them you will be their cup of tea and some of them you won't. But when it starts to be a pattern on very different types of coaches, that's where you worry. We always know that Christian Pulisic is a unique type of player and a unique type of individual. But if Christian Pulisic is constantly going to be waiting around for that perfect situation, then it's never going to come because the perfect situation never exists. And at some point, you're going to have to adjust or at least meet somebody halfway rather than constantly waiting for somebody else from a coaching perspective to adjust to you.
And to be clear, he's had stretches under some of those managers I named where he played regularly, most notably under Lampard during their post-COVID restart. But that's because he played so well that Lampard couldn't take him out of the lineup. When I think of a manager really trusting a player, it's that he gives them the benefit of the doubt, even if his form is just so-so. His natural inclination is to start him. I've never had that feeling with any manager in Pulisic's career where he has to pretty much be playing great and much better than the alternative. If it's close, he usually doesn't get that benefit of the doubt.
Well, as I mentioned in the previous segment when we were talking about the MLS MVP, I value consistency. And I think most managers, if you ask them, would you like somebody that plays really well, world-class level one game, and then takes 3 games off where they're not good and then comes back and you have that up and down? Nobody's going to want that, as opposed to at a lesser level but on a consistent. Managers, they want to be able to count on you. They are counting on you for their future and for their job. And if they can't count on you because every third game you play well, yeah, that's a problem. You are going to find that you are not going to play a lot despite your immense talent.
A guy who's getting on the field regularly and producing is Erling Holland. We'll go to that game next. Manchester City, a 5-0 demolition of Copenhagen. Holland with 2 of the goals. 28 in 22 games in his Champions League career. What can you say about him that we haven't already seen?
Nothing. You can't. I mean, should have had another hat trick. I mean,
frankly, I'm shocked he did,
right?
Because he scored the first 2 pretty early,
and they pulled him off. And the management of him. I mean, he has had injuries, but nothing chronic, and he is obviously a specimen when it comes to his physical abilities and the way that he uses his physicality. But you also at a certain point, if you're Pep, you're going to want to manage it for the long season that is coming. And for any player, nobody likes to be taken off, especially a goal scorer, and they feed off of goals. And I actually like the fact that he wants to stay on, that he wants to play, that he wants to score more goals. And you saw the reaction in Pep's face after he scored, where even Pep, who has seen it all, let's be honest, okay, and has seen the greatest and has coached the greatest, for him to have those types of reactions, it said to me, it's not anything I'm doing, Pep. This is the guy that's doing it, and we are seeing something, and the start of something that is just unlike anything we've ever seen. So it's great. It's must see.
So no hat trick for Holland today, but in the Juventus game, Angel Di Maria with a hat trick of assists. Juve 3-1 winners over Maccabi Haifa. Weston McKennie started, went all 90 minutes. Josh Cohen started in goal for Maccabi Haifa. The goals were Rabiot with a double, and Vlahovic got one as well. A much-needed win for Juventus.
See, there's a difference that we were talking about. With Weston McKennie, you know that your base level of Weston McKennie is such that is going to make you competitive and is competitive within the team, and that consistency that goes on. It's not that Weston McKennie doesn't have poor games, but he has very few of them. Now, he has some great games, but there's just that consistency of him. And again, he's starting. The team is getting the wins. They're not doing great Serie A-wise, but I think he is, again, valued in a very different way than a Christian Pulisic.
Benfica PSG 1-1. I mentioned Di Maria staying with the left-footed Argentine theme. Lionel Messi scored an absolutely sensational goal in this one to give PSG a 1-0 lead, and then Benfica equalized, and a very good result for them to hold PSG to a draw. Messi, we know he had a kind of an awkward first season there. Second season's been much better. He's been getting better and better, and I would say this is the first time in his PSG career where PSG Messi feels like Barcelona Messi to me, where almost every game now you expect something absolutely brilliant from him.
This particular goal, by the way, I mean, you say that it was an awesome goal. In and of itself, it wasn't awesome. It was a nice shot from the outside. He curls it in, which he, as others, can do. But the simplicity in it, I think, is where the beauty is. The interaction that he's had and the connection that he has with Neymar and Mbappe out there. This was, paint by numbers almost, but that everybody can see what is going to happen, and yet it still happens. That for me is just as amazing as something that you go, oh, I've never seen that before. Yes, you have seen these patterns before, and yet everybody knows it, everybody plans for it, and they still can't stop it, because at every point during that play, there is a clinical touch, movement, and technique that results in the goal. So it's worth it. However, it's not just about scoring goals; it's about results too. So this is not the worst result.
No, but it's a little bit of a stumble. Just to go back to your point about Messi, I hear sometimes whenever somebody like a Mo Salah scores a beautiful goal, I hear invariably some Premier League announcer say, boy, if that was Messi, it would have been replayed all over the world. The implication being that if it's Messi, it gets more attention. I actually think the opposite.
You don't think we appreciate it. We think we take it for granted.
I think he often scores goals that because he's made it seem so common that we don't make a big deal about that. If it was another player, it would be the nicest goal they've ever scored in their career. I mean, here you are. I mean, I'm not attacking you, but I'm saying because it's Messi, that goal didn't get you that excited because we've seen him do much more amazing things than that. But if it was just some random player, that I think that goal would have gotten.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the simplicity of that goal in particular on the surface would not measure up to the oohs and ahs of other goals, and yet I put it as important and as valuable.
Okay, I guess I'm making a different point,
but that you have to apologize for Messi because he's not getting enough love out there. I mean, all right, go ahead, you do you.
Well, Messi, second on the Champions League scoring list behind only Cristiano Ronaldo. Angel Di Maria, who we mentioned, is second on the Champions League assists list behind Cristiano Ronaldo. They're both gaining on him, and Ronaldo can't add to his numbers because, as we know, he's playing Europa League football this season. That's got to be killing him.
Well, we talked earlier this week about whether his legacy is being tarnished.
And by the way, I do want to clarify something. About that, because we had that conversation on our last pod and they made a little clip out of it. I've always been a staunch Messi over Ronaldo guy. The way you worded it, and I don't think you meant it this way, but you said, is this causing Messi to overtake Ronaldo? So a lot of people seized on that on Twitter. They said, well, why are we acting as if Ronaldo was ahead to begin with? I don't think that's how you intended the question, but some people interpret it that way.
You're a Messi guy, I'm a Ronaldo.
Right.
In this evergreen type of debate. And we're at a point right now. Well, let's be honest, we haven't been at a point like this where one is struggling so much more than the other. I mean, one is literally not playing right now. You mentioned they can't even keep up when it comes to Champions League because one isn't even in Champions League, let alone playing. All right, what else?
Dortmund flashed some of their young talent. They went to Spain and hammered Sevilla 4-1. Sevilla finally put Julian Lopetegui out of his misery, announcing after the game that he's been sacked. It's something everybody knew was going to happen, and they handled very poorly by them to leave him sort of dead man walking here for a little bit. And it sounds like it's going to be Jorge Sampaoli, who used to manage Sevilla, who's going to come back and take over. For Dortmund, I mentioned their young talent. Jude Bellingham scored again, goals in all three match days this season. Adeyemi got one, which Moukoko had an unbelievable touch in the build-up to that goal. So, pretty good day for Dortmund.
Do you think this is a more bigger picture question when it comes to Bellingham, who took the road less travel and everything? You think he's going to start given that first game that England would be against Iran in the World Cup?
I do, yeah. I've actually heard a lot of podcasts recently, English podcasts, debating that. Some people think he should definitely start. Others, well, I don't know. Depends on the formation that Southgate puts out. But I think he's becoming a guy that has to be out there in the 11. And then you think about their second game. We all know who it's against on Black Friday. Right. It'd be him and Declan Rice dueling it out with Adams, Musa, et cetera. So
I mean, I just love the story of the way he saw Jadon Sancho and recognized that this was a club that would play young players, and more importantly, he is performing, and he is captaining, and he is doing incredible things as a teenager. I was a moron as a teenager.
No Gio Reyna. He's still nursing that injury that he picked up over the international break with the U.S. Also, Wednesday, Leipzig beat Celtic 3-1. Nkunku on target. Andre Silva had a double, so nice win for them. Also in that same group, Real Madrid, 2-1 winners over Shakhtar. Rodrigo and Vinicius with the goals, which made me very happy. So that was it for match day 3 of the Champions League. We're at the midway point of this season's group stage.
And so we talked about Brugge, right? That would be the surprise of where we are right now. Bayern Munich sitting at the top of their group, so that's not a surprise. Sporting sitting at the top of their group over Tottenham in Group D. RB Salzburg at the top of their group. And that's an interesting one with Chelsea and Milan in it. So that would be another one. Real Madrid, no surprise there at the top of the group. Man City, we've talked about just the dominance that they have. And PSG sitting at the top of Group H. So a couple of surprises, which is a good thing. But the usual suspects continue on. Where should we go now?
Let's look ahead to some big European games at the weekend.
Big games.
We've got their Klassiker, Dortmund playing host to Bayern on Saturday. I mentioned that we covered the Bundesliga for 5 seasons on Fox. We went to great lengths to try to talk up this rivalry. And to be honest, lately, Dortmund haven't held up their end of the bargain. Bayern have won 10 of the last 11 Bundesliga meetings, a lot of those wins by pretty big score lines. So we'll see. We'll see about Gio Reyna, first of all, if he's available to give it an American component. But even if he's not, there's still so much exciting young talent that I'll be tuning in for. Musiala for Bayern, and I just mentioned guys like Moukoko and Bellingham and Adeyemi for Dortmund. So it should be a fun game.
I have hope, Marcy, that it is going to rise above the realities and the disparities between these two teams.
And, for more than a decade, the central figure in this rivalry has been Lewandowski on both sides, first with Dortmund, and then he went to Bayern. So it's going to be interesting to watch their Klassiker without him involved. But
Bayern Munich still needs to kind of rack up some points and continue on and kick on. They've had a good week, so we'll see if they can go into Dortmund in their Klassiker.
Also on Saturday, big game in Italy. AC Milan will host Juventus at the San Siro. As we mentioned, AC Milan, all sorts of injuries, so I expect Serginho Dest to start again. And Weston McKennie's been starting for Juventus, so I think both of them.
From a U.S. perspective, that'll be fun to see.
Incidentally, we were talking off air, and you mentioned the San Siro. I went there with my dad in 2005. We went to an Inter-Parma Serie A game when Adriano was at the peak of his powers, and I loved it. I thought it was an incredible stadium. And since then, it's kind of become a stadium that's brought up when people talk about how decrepit Italian football is. And sure enough, there's news now that Inter and AC Milan are going to build a brand new stadium. They've gotten approval from the city, and everybody's celebrating that. And I get that Italian football absolutely needs to evolve, so it makes sense. But I'm going to be sad to see that stadium go. I still, whenever I watch, we had Inter Barcelona this week. Whenever I watch any game on TV there, it still feels big. There's something about that stadium that still carries a mystique with me.
I remember the very first time I played in it, even before I went and played in Italy, the very first time I was invited over at Christmas a couple years before even the World Cup. They wanted American representation, and I was on the national team at the time, and I went over and played in a Christmas charity game. And it was all an all-star type of thing. And I remember walking into the stadium. And the great part about it is that there's no track. And it is kind of straight up. And it is it's one of the great cathedrals in the game. Now, the nostalgia and the romance for it, I think, has enabled it to survive. But it's also, relative to new places, not even close. And we know the problems when it comes to facilities in Italy. So that they are going to move on. I think, yes, you're going to lose a part of your history in San Siro, but at some point everything needs to come to an end, even San Siro, as much as you like it. But it's still an amazing place, to your point, to see a game. And it's if you get a chance, go.
Big game in England on Sunday. Arsenal will play host to Liverpool. Since Jurgen Klopp took over, it's been 18 games in all competitions between these two. Arsenal has only won one. There was also Community Shield that finished 1-1, and then Arsenal won on penalties, but I count that as a draw. So they've only had...
Mosse, this is 2023 fall Arsenal. It's a whole new leaf. This is everything new. I mean, this is different times.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. This is a real chance for them to make a statement, I think, validate everything they've done up to now. Liverpool are a bit all over the place. They had a 3-3 draw against Brighton in their last league game. Obviously beat Rangers in the Champions League, but yeah.
Can you imagine if Liverpool go in and somehow conjure up something from the past and rain on Arsenal's parade?
I'm on a big text chain with a group of Arsenal and Liverpool fans we work with. Keith Costigan's on there, Zach Kenworthy, some Arsenal fans, and that's already, the trash talking is already been. It's always fun when those two teams meet. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that.
I'm calling it right now. Liverpool over Arsenal.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Shoot your shot.
Also in England, Crystal Palace hosts Leeds. I just hope Crystal Palace have the right approach. They don't slow the game down, because otherwise Jesse Marsch is going to be upset.
He's going to be, he'll be able to be upset from the sideline there, because he'll be back coaching there, and he can scream and yell directly at the opposing coach and or fans or players out there if, God forbid, somebody starts to waste time. But they need a result. I mean, Jesse, they need to figure it out here, and it's not easy.
And we'll end this segment by talking about a women's international game that we're really excited about.
Oh, yeah.
Friday, we're going to be covering it. England versus the United States from sold-out Wembley, live on Fox. It's the European champions against the world champions. A lot of people building this up as kind of a test to see if Europe has really caught up and overtaken the U.S. or if the U.S. is still,
Mosse, let me pick your brain for a second here. The world is still bigger than Europe, right?
Yes.
I just want to make sure. So when you're talking about world champions, that those are bigger than the European champions, right?
Correct.
Okay, just checking. This is cool. I can't wait to see this. I can't wait to see this team that is still in transition and is evolving under Vlatko Andonovski. And up top, Alex Morgan did not make the trip. So that's Alex Morgan not there. That's Macario not there. So who ultimately steps into that number 9 position for this big game? And let's be honest, Mosse, the amount of times where we get to actually see our U.S. women's national team in a truly competitive scenario, playing somebody that is of their quality and in an environment that is hostile is minimal. And so this is a great, great game. I cannot wait to watch it. I would love nothing more than to beat England for the first time this year, hopefully. And to do it in Wembley, in a sold-out Wembley, will be wonderful. Keep in mind, though, that for the last 2 cycles when it comes to the U.S. women's national team, we know they've won the World Cup. They're going for 3 in a row, something that's never been done. Around about this time, or actually a little closer to the World Cup, they've gotten punched in the nose. It's been with France, and it's been a reminder that people aren't going to roll over, and that the elites, which ultimately where they are judged against, they can find ways to beat them. And England sees themselves as progressing and evolving, not just to the U.S. level, but maybe in some ways past their level. And so I think they're putting a lot of eggs in this basket as to what happens. Coaches won't say that, and obviously the World Cup next summer is the most important right now. But if for nothing else, you tune in to see the spectacle of U.S. England in a sold-out stadium with 2 teams that both believe they are better than each other.
Would you say these are the 2 best women's national teams in the world right now?
I think so. I think so. I mean, England chirps a lot, and so that kind of that influences the perception of them. I think that they think they're better than they actually are, but it doesn't mean that they can't beat the U.S. in this game.
It's funny. I thought your hesitation there was about the U.S., whether the U.S. right now in current form belongs in that top 2, or whether you'd argue that there are 3 or 4 European nations that might be ahead of them right now.
Ahead of them right now? I don't know. I mean, no, I don't think. I think
you're not ready.
I think the U.S. I still think the U.S. still has the depth, albeit there's a level of inexperience in this team in particular right now as it transitions. But yeah, they're still the best team in the world.
Fair enough. All right, so that's Friday, Big Fox. Can't wait. Should be excellent.
That'll be good. All right, let's take another quick break, and when we come back, it's time for Ask Alexi. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, and it's time for Ask Alexi, that portion of the show where you send in your questions using that hashtag Ask Alexi to all of our different platforms out there. And by the way, on those social media platforms, our handles are SOTU with Alexi. Or, as a lot of people do, you can call into our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297. That's 657-549-2297. All right, this show, Mosse, I think we have some voicemail and we have some Twitter responses here. Let's go to the voicemail first.
Hey, guys. This is David from Texas. Just curious as why Greg brings in amazing strikers like Brandon Vasquez from Cincinnati, but doesn't give him any good playing time. I think he's a great option at the number 9 striker, especially with Ferrer's form and our lack of striking ability. And then I think just his hold-up play, and then I think he could be a real asset in set pieces since we just can't really find our groove there. And our set piece takers is really not in form. All the corners and free kicks are looking like trash. If you could just give me your 2 cents on that, I'd love it to hear it all. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, David from Texas. I think David, if I heard him correctly, is a little bit confused in that he was saying that Greg Berhalter has brought in Brandon Vasquez. That is not the case, and that's actually where a lot of the conversation comes right now, is that he didn't and decided not to bring Brandon Vasquez into this last camp. Now, conceivably, he could bring him into this MLS-ish type of camp that they have here coming up for all the players that are done with the season and get a look at him there. That would be better than nothing, but I think it would be very difficult for anybody coming into that camp, let alone somebody that's never been with the team, to come in and make enough of an impression where they then get on the plane to Qatar. But David's point about set pieces, we've talked about the problems, and it's just it's concerning, but it's also irritating, because in this moment and this cycle of progression and evolution, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. And a hallmark for many, many years for the U.S. national team has been set pieces and an ability to recognize their value and, more importantly, to capitalize off on them. And this team, it's not that they don't. I mean, we look back at the Gold Cups and Nations League and that type of stuff where, yes, you found ways. But I want to be excited and get out of my seat each and every time a set-piece situation comes up from a U.S. men's national team perspective where, hey, this is a potential opportunity for us to put the ball in the back of the net. And it might not be happening in the course of the regular play, but Christian Pulisic might get taken down or somebody else might get taken down. And I want to be excited about what is in front and the possibility of something happening. And we're not getting that. Keep in mind, again, I'll remind you, the U.S. men's national team has a set-piece coach, a specific coach that all he does is worry about defending and attacking set pieces. And that's where this coach will make their money. So that's the set-piece part. And, yeah, that's a problem. Brandon Vazquez is taller, so that would be good. I mean, it goes back to, I think that train is gone. It's not going to happen when it comes to Brandon Vazquez. Even though I wanted it to at least get a shot in this last window, I think Greg Berhalter has made very, very clearly, both in terms of the things that he has said, but more importantly, the things that he has done, that he's going to dance with the ones that brung him, that he has a belief based on an assessment over the cycle and over time that is not colored by one or two games or one or two moments. And those are the types of players that he is going to go with. And, let the chips fall where they may. There's not a Landon Donovan-esque player sitting on the sideline, but there are players, and it's just natural in this course of events with so many different, with so much depth. There are players that if it doesn't go well, people are going to point to, and that just comes with the territory. It doesn't mean that he made the wrong decision, but because there are players that are waiting in the wings and not being utilized at positions that we need and are not strong at, you kind of set yourself up for some criticism. So, David from Texas, while you and I maybe have wanted to see Brandon Vazquez, it didn't happen, and I don't see it happening unless some crazy soccer goddish type of thing happens. Let's see. Do we have a text? Is that true, Mosse? Is that what I'm reading here?
Yes.
All right, listen, before we do this, please leave a message, all right? The hotline is for messages that you leave. But evidently we have a text from an unknown number here, and so we will read this out. But it's not really a text hotline. I suppose you can do it, but we'd much rather hear from you and your voice here. So we had a text from an unknown number, and someone said, why not play a counterattacking 4-4-2? I'm assuming he's meaning the U.S. men's national team. Now, let's be honest. We were talking earlier in the pod about nostalgia and romance. I am romantic for a 4-4-2, and I truly believe that everything is cyclical and everything comes back around again. And so the de jure type of formation will eventually come back to a 4-4-2, but not anytime soon. And the strategy involved and the limitations and the challenges in a 4-4-2 are well documented. I like it because I think it's simple, but sometimes in its simplicity, it can be broken down in ways that other formations can't. I will say, whoever this texter was, the notion that Greg Berhalter should simplify the roles individually and how this team plays, I can get on board with that. I just think that he's run out of time to do maybe what he ultimately planned to do, which is okay. But come the World Cup, I want to make sure that everybody understands and is clear exactly what they want to do. And yes, that should have happened over the cycle. And oftentimes in a 4-4-2, it's very clear, just in and of itself, how you are supposed to play. I don't know. You like the 4-4-2, Mosse? I mean, do you get into all that in the weeds type of stuff when it comes to formations and stuff?
Well, it's funny. At a time when we're talking about maybe playing without a striker, this guy wants to play with two up top. But I guess I'd have to know who the players are. Where's the width going to come from? Is it going to be entirely in the fullbacks, Dest and Jedi? Because if you're thinking about a 4-man midfield, I assume he would want to do Adams, Musa, McKennie, and one of Reyna or Aronson or somebody like that. And then I'd have to see who the two up top are. Are they going to be two out and out forward? Obviously, you got to still find a place for Pulisic, so presumably he would be one of them. And then the other one would be a center forward type, and we're calling that a 4-4-2.
Sure,
I mean, I guess it's semantics.
And if the midfield that we now have 3 on obviously goes to 2, it's much more work for those guys. And if you don't have the ball, it can get problematic. If you started your team right now and you were able to say, well, I'm going to put the system in first, and then I'm going to go get the players, much more of a club type of way of doing it, what would you do?
Well, yeah, I wonder if this guy, when he says 4-4-2, he's viewing Pulisic and, I don't know, maybe Aronson on the right as part of the 4 in the midfield. So it was just really 2 out-and-out midfielders, Pulisic and let's say Aronson as wide
as opposed to what? How do you play 4-4-2?
Well, and that's what I'm saying. I just assume that any U.S. fan would want Adams, McKennie, and Musa to be in the midfield. So I was thinking about
You can't play 3 guys in the middle
of
a
a
4-4-2.
Well, no, but if that fourth guy is sort of, like I said, a Reyna or an Aronson, but in more of a midfielder-ish role, you'd populate the midfield with guys, and then you're relying on the fullbacks to provide your width. So there's a way you could do it that way. But again, we're trying to read his mind. I don't know exactly what he meant.
But it's a fun exercise. But there's no chance in hell that Greg Berhalter is playing a 4-4-2. At times he might change to a back 3 and do some different things here or there. But that's not what he implemented from the start, and that would be a complete deviation and a complete surprise. What else do we have, Mosse? We have something from Twitter?
Yes. Joey on Twitter asks, what is your biggest reason for optimism in this year's team?
So a couple of reasons, Joey, and thank you for your question. Just in general, while I certainly can grumpy old man and grouch with the best of them, I am an optimist when it comes to life in general and when it comes to my national team. I am not sticking my head in the sand, and I am not, like I said, just looking through a rose-colored glasses type of thing. But I do believe in seeing things as glass half full as opposed to half empty. But again, not without reason. And when it comes to this U.S. men's national team, what gives me optimism is they have shown it in the past. So at least I have a history where they have risen to the occasion and they have played in a way that has made me proud and excited and ultimately has been successful in big games. Number 2, the youth of this team. It gets me excited that we are sending the youngest team to the World Cup. It doesn't mean that there won't be mistakes, and even mistakes that will make you pull out your hair. But I think in general, in the overall scheme of things, it is a good thing. I think that youth will serve them well. I think that they will use that youth to have that youthful swagger, to be able to recognize the opportunity. The other thing is, I think that there's much greater feeling of belonging for these players and this generation and this team. They're not necessarily strangers in a strange land when it comes to not just playing in a World Cup, but playing overseas and playing at big clubs and playing in big games. And therefore, they're not as wide-eyed as my generation kind of just was and had to be. And, I guess finally it goes back to that inherent, optimism of believing that when it comes to a World Cup, magical things can happen for all teams and for all players. But in this case, I'm looking at it from a U.S. perspective. And the belief and the confidence in yourself that you will be able to tap into magic along with your talent and your ability. I hold that even though I'm not kicking a ball. And I love it when I see it in anyone, and in particular when it comes to this U.S. team. It's not without fault, and it's not without problems and challenges when it comes to this team. And it's certainly not a perfect team, and it can get their ass kicked, and it can make mistakes. But it's still a team that makes me excited. I'm excited that they're back after not having been there last World Cup. But I'm excited in particular that this team, this group of players, is the one that is taking it upon themselves to bring us back to the World Cup because of how different they are individually and collectively, and how much better and more advanced they are. So I don't know, Mosse. Maybe my belief and my confidence is misplaced, but I'd rather go out being an optimist than a pessimist.
My biggest reason for optimism in the U.S. is watching Gareth Bale play. I'm honest. I'm only half joking.
Oh, I know.
I think
it's strange.
I continue to say I think this is the very favorable group for the U.S. I'm trying to think back to U.S. World Cup teams from '94 on down, and how many of them wouldn't get out of this? I think most of them would, if you think about it. England, Wales, Iran. I think, I know Iran showed in this recent window they're better than we thought. They beat Uruguay. They've got some players. But I still think overall this is a group set up for the U.S. to get out of it.
Yeah, so do it. All right. And the Bale thing, I mean, we could talk forever on that. It's just very, very strange. And if he's sandbagging, fine. But, he has been a shell of himself, and now he's even more of a shell of himself since he's come over to Major League Soccer. It's mind-numbing. Okay, anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right, again, thank you for all of your questions and your comments and your concerns out there, whether it was in the form of voicemail at our State of the Union podcast hotline, 657-549-2297, or in the case of one person texting into that number, which I suppose you can do, but we're probably not going to read a whole lot of them. But this was, since it was such a unique thing to happen, we thought we'd include that. And then, of course, on all the social media platforms out there. Again, SOTU with Alexi. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, it's the end of our show, and I give you my one for the road. All right, welcome back. It is the end of our show, and at the end of each and every show, I give you my one for the road. We're going to end this show with a take on the Yates Report. For those that don't know, this week, the Yates Report dropped. It is a report that was commissioned by the United States Soccer Federation to look into allegations and reports of verbal, emotional, and sexual misconduct within the NWSL. It was a group of women that was put together, and this report that they have put out is 170 pages. So I wanted to read the whole thing before I talked about it, and I did. I read the entire thing. And as I said before, it looks into this misconduct, and it finds misconduct when it comes to coaches, administrators, and owners in the NWSL. More so, they also found, although this was not the focus of this report, that there are systemic problems within youth soccer. Needless to say, this is not only a long read, but it is a incredibly detailed read, and it in equal parts makes you sad and frustrated and angry at the way that these young women who were incredibly courageous were treated in these professional environments. And the Yates Report also makes recommendations going forward, and I think without a doubt that they should be followed and implemented as quickly as possible. And part of the problem is that they didn't exist. If and when misconduct is identified and verified, then obviously action needs to be taken. And when that action is taken, that information needs to be shared so that one problem and one mistake don't become more down the line. And as is very, very clearly laid out in this report, that was not the case. And that has not been the case for for a long time, unfortunately. Again, the young women who were following their dream of being professional soccer players in a league that, yes, was fledgling and, like all new ventures, was starting out and had difficulties and problems and challenges. Ultimately, they were playing soccer and they were in a professional environment, even if at times they weren't treated like they were in a professional environment. Having said all of that, that's no excuse for the misconduct that took place. In particular, when we're talking about these coaches that have absolutely no one to blame but themselves for what happened. When it comes to next steps, I talked about the things that need to be done and the recommendations within the report that obviously need to take place. When it comes to the NWSL, this is our league. And while this is focused on the NWSL, as I mentioned, the systemic problems that they talk about here, this is not just an NWSL problem. This is a soccer problem. And therefore, whether we are involved or not, directly and or indirectly, we are responsible. And so it's up to us to take action and to support and to make those changes that need to be made to create a healthy and better environment for the existing players, but also for the future players. When it comes to the NWSL and what they are going to do, because this is not just a blemish, this is not just something that can be swept away. This is a real problem. It's a real problem from a personal, emotional, and a moral perspective, but it's also a problem in terms of this business that continues to grow and that we all want to not just survive, but thrive, and has the potential to be great both on and off the field and give future generations the opportunity to live out their dreams as professional athletes, but not in the way that it exists now. And so the changes have to be made, and they have to be made quickly. And I don't know what the NWSL is going to do after this has come out. It's a sad, sad week for soccer and obviously for the NWSL. And it requires swift action. And we've already seen some of the ramifications of this in the forms of firings. Maybe going forward, we see a cancellation of, games or the rest of the league. That's how serious this is right now. Maybe, from a practical perspective, you see a rebranding of the NWSL, because this will, for a long time, be attached, and that hurts you in terms of the perception, and that hurts you from a practical perspective when it comes to the business. And, we've already seen some of the sponsors out there talking about the change that needs to come in order for them to be a part. And that's a good thing. I will say, I am 52 years old, and in a life and soccer perspective, I am from a different generation. A lot of what is talked about here, I think, is a dramatic representation of the evolution and the change and the progress that our sport is making, and relative to the accepted norms of what coaching is and the behavior that is acceptable and isn't acceptable. A lot of this talks about, the verbal misconduct and the emotional misconduct and, the yelling. And yelling in and of itself, I don't think anybody thinks is a problem. Certainly, there is an argument that it's not the best way to motivate, but that's a subjective type of opinion out there. And certainly there are cases where what you say is completely inappropriate and is ultimately abuse. But raising your voice and believing that that is something that you need to do to motivate calling out players, yeah, even at times shaming and embarrassing players in the things that you say. And from a verbal perspective, that's, I know at this point, maybe an old school way of doing things. And again, in and of itself isn't necessarily a problem, but the world is changing and our sport is changing, and the way that you are able to coach is changing. And if you don't change with it, you will have problems. And I think that this report dramatically, as I said, lays out the way that things have changed. And, being from a different time and being from a different generation is not a good excuse, and it's not going to fly going forward. And I hope that going forward, it is crystal clear as to what is acceptable behavior and what isn't acceptable behavior. And that it hasn't been made crystal clear is another one of the problems and another one of the faults when it comes to what's going on. And if it ultimately is a systemic problem that goes well into youth soccer, that has to be dealt with too. So I hope it is. I hope that at a certain point, NWSL, if that's what it's called or anything else, can move forward and learn. But ultimately, this is not a good thing. This is a sad day for American soccer, not just NWSL. And ultimately, my heart goes out to all of the young women who had the courage to step up and to tell their story and to talk about their experiences in incredibly detailed way. And I have a daughter. I would never, ever want her to go through something like that. And just because you are a professional soccer player doesn't mean that anybody has the right to do or say some of the things that are alleged in this document. And I hope that we can create a situation for the current players, and like I said, for the future players, that none of them ever have to go through what some of these young women are alleging in this report. If you have the time, read it. If you are into soccer and into American soccer, it is part now of our history, not a shining part of our history, but a part of our history nonetheless. And I think you would be better off, as difficult as it is to read, and like I said, as maddening and sad as it is ultimately to read. Check it out. Thank you, as always, for hanging out with us here on the State of the Union. I'm sorry we had to finish it off on such a down note, but I wanted to take the time to read it before I talked about it, like I said, and I wanted to take a space within the State of the Union here to talk about it. And who knows, we might talk about it much more going forward as everything kind of moves on and evolves from here, hopefully in a much more positive way. Until next time, size the day.